So hello, everybody. Thank you for your patience. I just want to check, can you hear my voice loudly and clearly? Okay, wonderful. It looks like the sound system is getting figured out. Hello, Sogi. So, and you can see us clearly? All right. So Geshe is just saying Tashi Dele to everyone. Can everyone hear him all right? Do you hear Geshe as well? Great. Okay. Okay. So firstly, to all Dharma friends in whatever place you may be, Geshe hopes that you are well and he hopes that you are happy. And so we are gathering today. We should imagine that we are all gathered together and that we gather together with a happy, joyful attitude or mind. And why should we be happy that we are gathered together here today? Well, part of it has to do with the reason that we are gathered. We are gathered to accumulate the causes for happiness for ourselves and others. We are gathered to accumulate the causes for the welfare, the true well-being of both ourselves and others. And in fact, we are engaged in the activities of accumulating all of the conditions, not only the outer conditions, but also the inner conditions for the happiness of both ourselves and others. So there is no more meaningful work than this. So what is the reason then that in this context we are gathered here together? And what is the reason that we put effort into study and practice? Because it is said that the beings of the world, right, who don't have this knowledge, the ways that they try to gain that lasting happiness, they're actually not going to work. It's actually not going to work. So there is kind of the way things that are apprehended and the there are the things that the way that things appear and the way that things are apprehended. So we are deceived by appearances, right? There's these appearances of these kind of worldly things that we think are going to make us happy, and we obtain them, and we might kind of achieve some sort of minor type of happiness, but we're distracted from accumulating the causes of that lasting happiness. And in this way, it's almost like we are cheated or deceived by those appearances. So what we want to do is not be completely sort of bewildered by these appearances, but we want to look at the ngune netsu. So the ngune netsu, they say ultimate mode of abiding, but I would translate that as the way things really are, right? We want to understand the way things really are so we can apprehend them correctly. So because we are kind of completely deceived by the mode of appearance, yeah. So being completely bewildered by these appearances and putting too much emphasis, putting too much weight on these appearances, these are the causes of our own problems and also generally all of the problems in the world, we could say.
This one, or tang to make talking to us, Magedo, Martin, the Neola Supercar, no such pochilla one nila, that what the machine at time, not a more.
We could say all of the wars, all of the inequalities, the different types of suffering, of illness, and so forth in the world, that these can really be traced back to just focusing on appearances, being completely bewildered by appearances.
Or tang to Chalal Tower Noji. Show Jenny, Casacani Tanimato, show Chichibal time.
Yeah. So, like when we say, I think Geshe is saying, like when we say bewildered by these appearances, what would that be like? It's like when we walk into a shop or a store that we really like, we can't focus on one thing, right? We're kind of like looking all over the place. Yeah.
Oh, Tandal Carrent, Jalul Carrent, or show Yael Carrent, Chaso Chitane.
But
But
what we want to do is go beyond the appearances and not be bewildered, right? So that we can see what's in front of us and deal with that, so that we can see what is behind us and deal with that, so that we can see what is to either side of us. So to be able to kind of develop that focus.
Oh, that is the order to dig that order need and the letter, the catching boyiza. No to do, that's a new, and that's in it, the catching boyiza. So you then take another dish, the agate, the Dembani, some of Dembachi, to Bojaya Maris.
So then we said that we want to go beyond these appearances, right? That the appearances are not the most important thing, right? That the most important thing is the ngune netsu, right? The mode of abiding, or the way that things really are. So in terms of the way that things really are, in terms of that mode of abiding, the Buddha taught the two truths, relative and ultimate. And the way things are relates to both of those, not just one or the other.
Or that Deshi Yachoro, Deshi in it, go do us, Deshi in it, go yona. No, you won't go on there, or them tattoo with them at the Demasia.
So if you want real happiness, then don't be completely sort of captivated, right, or seduced merely by appearances. Go beyond those appearances and look towards the two truths, especially ultimate truth.
No selling in a taki, jelly in a yo. Hakasara, only Jitebi Tapietawa.
So when we talk about the subject or the object possessor, we talk about right view. We talk about the right view of worldly things, and we talk about the right view of ultimate things. So when we talk about the correct view in the worldly sense, mainly we are talking about the correct view of cause and effect, or karma. And by kind of understanding and abiding by that correct view of cause and effect, we can close the door to the three unfortunate states of existence, or the three lower realms.
This one,
so when we talk about the right view that is beyond the world, we're talking about cultivating the right view that will lead to liberation. In other words, a state beyond samsara, where that lasting happiness is achieved.
So this
is by way of an introduction, and just in a capsule, we talk about the mode of appearance, right? How things appear, and the mode of abiding, the way things really are. So his request to you is, don't completely put your focus on these appearances, but instead also investigate the way things really are, their ultimate mode of abiding. But because to really penetrate that, of course, we can't do that when our mind is busy. We need a mind that is peaceful and stable. Then let us take a moment to relax and calm the mind. So think, in order to put the body at ease, in order to put the mind at ease and at peace, we're going to start by just emptying the mind of thoughts. Try to empty the mind of any thoughts and perceptions.
timba kabo nabo karina timba lungi teba noji oda soso ka lele deba yin ta chomebe tsawatu no to kanga ba yin do du so.
So if we think about the sky, we can think about the clouds and whether the clouds are gray or whether the clouds are white. If we just allow the clouds to float by, eventually the sky will be clear again. So we take this kind of same attitude towards any distracting thought. Think now the sky has become vast. Sorry, the mind has become vast and empty, just like the sky. It's different than how it was before. There's a spaciousness.
Yene se mi ba ye ba jine yu shilando wa molando wa ni ta chungka zeng la chungka jeze na hu chi is.
So now we'll take an object of focus for our mind in this meditation and just take as the focus the rising and falling of the breath. So breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I'm aware I'm breathing out. And if you like, you can try to count to 10 inhalations and exhalations.
Pando song hui chi le song tema chi ba te manu wa ma ta ye se kargana tong te.
So think as I breathe out, I'm aware I'm breathing out. As I breathe in, I'm aware I'm breathing in, and I count to 1. And any kind of distracting thought that arises, I just won't pay it any attention. And that's a count of 1.
So wa tanda ba ta tunyo da ko chi to ni la ka shi yo ai ta lion le se yo le da bo ta de bo cha song so.
So think that through these exercises, I've been able to tap into the fundamental nature of the mind, which is a ground of equanimity. It is neutral. Because I've been able to touch that equanimity, then the mind becomes peaceful and relaxed. And if we delve a little bit further, we can see that the self considers my mind, that its nature is actually luminous. Its nature is pure luminosity and clear in knowing. And this fundamental aspect of the mind, it is not something that ends. It exists in an unbroken continuity from the immeasurable past until now. And because of this fundamental nature of the mind, this gives us the capacity to really do with the mind what we like. Just like a white piece of cloth can easily be dyed any color, yellow, red, blue, and so forth, we can fashion the mind.
다 고르지 고르지 마대 든지가 내서 시리 가보는 거 지가 이다. 전에 소망년 봐. 아니 어다 든지가 세도 반제소나 니가라요 강에 뭐 전에 강에 가야 돼.
Because the nature of the mind can take on any hue or any color, when we have unwholesome or unskillful thoughts, right? These can cause the mind to take on a negative character.
다 용 로지 든지 연바지라 다 송바송보 정바 니지 어다 제와 어다 든지도 봐. 그래서는 럼바 동문에 봐 대시 의미가 다 거지치 됐어.
Similarly, because of this fundamental neutral nature of the mind, if we bring forth thoughts of kindness, genuine concern for others, love, compassion, then the mind can be permeated with what is positive, with what is wholesome.
가세 지구 보게 숑바도 니지도 선바송보도 받지도 오만 리바노 시에도서나 다 대시 대체로 저런 강에 강가 뉴런저런도 하고 고성죠. 야스들이 야보지 됐어.
So when we infuse the mind with joyful thoughts of love, compassion, and kindness, and these positive qualities are mixed with our mind like milk and water together, naturally we will become happier and happier, and our problems and our negative states will become fewer and fewer.
대시 대학 차체 강가 로로서 솔런데 이제는 작고 뭐 다대 할래야 가초야 가고 첨부 제초야 그냥 그래도 소마치.
I have all the tools and I have all the facilities in my hands right now to be able to accumulate the causes of true happiness. There's a no better time than now. So that is something to really feel glad about.
소승이니 가제 더더 템보체기 있네. 소지도 손지 셈바시고 도마 강게 바샤라 템본자 바노노 낙서 왔다고요 소마치.
So having brought forth this determination in my mind to build these qualities, then I will request the blessings of the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, and all of the holy beings to be able to do this. Oh, yes. Let me just make sure our settings are correct so you can hear the chanting.
So
Geshe said, really think about this. We have everything that we need to achieve that ultimate happiness. There's nothing more outside that we need to seek. We have everything we need right now. Just think about that. That's actually pretty amazing. Tembal chom den de jin jeba dra chom ba yan da bar zo be song re ba dang shab su Demba dewar sheba jigden gemba jebudu e galo gyurwa lana meba la Begya
shakya tu bala chazelo judo kyabsu ji o Tenpa chomden de dejin sheba drachon ba yang daba zobe sanje sheba dang shaozu denpa dewa sheba jiden chenpa chebu doye kalo jorwa lana mepa ladang mi namgi tenpa sangye chomden de pe jawa shakya tuba la chazelo chede chabzu ji ho tenpa chomden de dejin sheba drachon ba yang daba zobe sangye reba dang shaozu denpa dewa sheba jiten chenpa chebu duwe kalo jorwa lana meba ladang mi namgi tenpa sangye chomden de pe jawa shakya tuba la chazelo chede kyabsu ji ho. Now we'll go to the mandala offering. So ji bagi jo jing me do ram ri ram ling ji ni de gyen ba di sangye jin du me de bu wa ye Drogu nama da jing la che bar jo idam guru ratna mendala kam niryatayami. Refuge and bodhicitta. Chedon sogi chenam la jangchu bardu dani gyabzu chi dagi chinyen gibe senang gi jola benjir sangye jobasho. Chedon sogi chenam la jangchu bardu dani gyabzu chi dagi chinyen gibe senang gi jola benjir sangye jobasho. Chedon sogi chenam lai jangchu bardu dani gyabzu chi dagi chinyen gibe senang gi jola benjir sangye jobasho.
오야 다 대용 때문에 도마들 다 당긴 것만 샤차로 세 지모 대용도 왔어 샤차세나 아니 손제도 걸어서 예대 대통령이라 예대 대내라 대노지 증아로라 이거 세기와레스.
So we have this these prostrations, right? We offer prostrations and homage in many cases during the prayer. So the word prostration in Tibetan, chag tsal, it's kind of like acknowledging that I see and offer respect to the positive qualities that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have developed, and I too need to develop those positive qualities. This is an awareness we can have when we say those words. So the tsal, so the chak is like, it's like this, like prostrating, right? And the tsal is like almost like saying, I also am seeking those qualities. I also want those qualities, right? Yeah, so of course we really want to think when we offer these homages what those qualities that those beings possess are that we want to develop ourselves, right? That we want to bring forth ourselves. Like thinking about the qualities that those beings possess, that's wonderful, but it's not fully going to get us there.
어느 시험시고 동바카시가 좀온다고 자치신 좀온다고 그랬더니 대스 question to us. 여도 세링아로스 체 토벌레비칼 아니 로바체케트리 대할래 하시라 문디세.
Yidam ganso
체 토벌레 사레제나 두번다고 그랬는데 와서 로바체케트.
So there were some great masters who were sort of joking around, and they said that, you know, like the yidam is something that you kind of finally see or finally actualize when you're already completely developed. So that's not such an amazing thing, actually. So in the beginning, right, as beginners, we can't encounter our yidam directly. So our dharma friends are actually really important. And so when we contemplate these qualities, right, we don't just offer homage, but we also think about them from the perspective of things that we want to develop ourselves. Once bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness are actualized within our mind stream, then from that point, right, everything gets a lot easier. But until those are actualized within the mind stream, right, we have to work with training ourselves and really developing our motivation in the beginning stages. This is really important. Oh, Mengi Qingtong. Yeah. Yeah. So it's just like if we look outside in our natural world, right? If we want to grow a tree, a positive tree, a useful tree grows from a wholesome seed. So in that way, right, we understand that if we plant an apple seed into the ground, eventually we'll have a tree and be able to have a harvest of apples. So inside, it's like this ground of the mind, which we talked about as being in a neutral character, as having a quality of equanimity, right? That ground of a quality of the mind is like the soil. It's like the soil that we're working with. Yeah. And it's really that inner quality of the mind that makes human beings a little bit different. Because if you look at the body of human beings, it's actually not something so amazing. There's a lot of creatures that are more impressive. Think of an elephant, for example, right? It's a lot more physically powerful than a human being. But the human mind, it has this quality of expansiveness, this clear knowing quality that is kind of incredibly vast and useful. So if in that ground, which is so vast, we can plant that positive seed, then that positive seed can bring forth a very great harvest, right? This is the character of the human mind. So if we think about the 7-point cause and effect instruction for developing bodhicitta, for example, we start with developing equanimity, don't we? And that taps into that neutral, that equanimous. Is that a word, equanimous? I don't know if it is. Okay. It touches into that. I'm going to try it. Tell me later if I was wrong. It touches into that equanimous nature of the mind. And then we plant those seeds of seeing all beings as our mother or the person close to us, remembering the kindness, wishing to repay, and so forth. So this mind provides this wonderful ground, this fertile soil in which we can plant the seeds of these positive qualities and come to an amazing result of this harvest of what is wholesome. So thinking I want to plant the seeds of positivity in my mind in the best way possible, let's just take a moment to relax and develop our focus, put the mind in a peaceful state. So I'm preparing this ground. I'm getting this ground ready. And to begin that, I'm going to relax. So then, delving a little bit deeply, let's tap into this concept that we have of me, this concept of the self or the I, and then think about, on the basis of that, what we call my mind, and then think about it in the positive sense, from the point of view of rik, or potential. We have the potential for enlightenment within us. We have the potential for liberation within us. So it's a great mistake, right? And it's a great obstacle in our practice to think of our nature as something that is negative, to think I'm a bad person, to think I am a sad person, an unworthy person. This is actually a great obstacle to our practice. Think, within me, I have these positive potentials. Buddha nature, the potential for enlightenment, the potential for liberation, the potential to become a bodhisattva. And just as I possess this potential, the sentient beings closest to me possess this potential. The sentient beings who are strangers to me possess this potential. And the sentient beings that I find difficult, that I might even see as my enemies, possess this potential. In other words, every single last sentient being within samsara has this aspect of positive potential. Every last sentient being, they have different bodies and they abide in different realms. But there is not one single sentient being that lacks these positive potentials deep within them. And in that way, there is not one single sentient being that is completely bad or unworthy or far away from me. Every single sentient being is close to me because we share these qualities. So every single sentient being, right, because they possess these qualities, we can't look down on a single one, right? There is not a single one that is not precious, that is not possessing these qualities. Whether we look at a cow, a monkey, even an insect, and certainly another human being, there's no way to say that they will not be able to achieve bodhicitta before we do.
대존도 맞아 강가 로로 당하로 순간가 사들 따와 있는 다 예주주의 마도 다 자치 좀에 선bat대 뭐
In understanding that, we will also see that all beings share this potential to develop these qualities, and in this way, that I call the self, or that I call the I, it is immeasurably close and connected to every single one of those sentient beings. There's none who is far away from me.
코로순데바 노지 대시 부서 수바지 때다가 그런데 다 tello 수지마 더 받대 더 매아이자 대도하게 지다 수지지 공부도 바샤기 놈이다 쇼주세 가서다
Because they are all immeasurably close to me, then I must achieve their welfare. I am not able to do that with my current limited capacity. Therefore, I must achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings, to lead them to that lasting happiness. Bring forth the mind of bodhicitta. If I really set myself to this task, I 100% can achieve it. And the Buddha says that even those born in the animal realm can bring forth powerful positive minds. Then certainly in my current human form, I am able to do that.
danza mari pa inere rungu chinze inere de cho control ta nyemo kande zi ina yo paja da chiba ko roji chita me ais den den jawa to thogre sombaji.
These negative states, like the ignorance grasping at the self, self-cherishing, attachment, anger, and so forth, there is not even an atom of those unwholesome minds that exists from its own side, that is truly existent. Therefore, they can definitely be cleared away. So I saw a comment coming about the word equanimity and looking this up in the dictionary. I think it's very useful to know what these words mean in the English language, but actually it can also be deceptive. Translate, we take the best available English word that we have. Right? But the word in English doesn't truly do justice to what the Tibetan word is expressing. So I think looking it up in the dictionary is a first step, but especially for equanimity, you want to take a look in the Lam Rim about how equanimity is defined there, because it might be a little bit different than how we think it might work right in English. So just a side comment. Okay. So in this way, we have completed our preliminary practices for today's session. So in this way, we are set out to achieve the welfare of others, and we know that we do this through actualizing the practices of method and wisdom, and so we are on the foundation stone of the house that we are building to be able to do that. And so, of course, it's up to us whether we cultivate these practices or not. But in terms of the practices being available with the instructions that are available to us, it's just like the lamas have set out this incredible banquet, this full meal in front of us, right? So whether we get up and we decide to eat, that is up to us. Yeah. It's like if somebody prepares you a meal and sets you in front of it and you don't pick up your knife and fork, the fault is not theirs, right? It's your choice not to eat that meal.
What that thing with that dinner about Tombo and Lojon is that dinner, Halevita, she would Lamasa, Chimboja, Halevita, Chimbotsua, that thing under Inimijako.
And so in terms of these instructions of the mind training or the Lojong teachings, when we consider the source, right, the practitioners and the people who put forth the Lojong teachings were kind of incredibly holy and realized individuals. So it's good to appreciate this, actually. Yeah. So generally, of course, when we speak about these holy beings, we understand that these holy beings were present in all of the different traditions. So in the case of Tibet, there were realized beings in the Sakya, the Geluk, the Kagyu, the Nyingma traditions, right? There were all of these great realized beings. But in terms of these high-level practitioners, right, their practice and their realization was often kind of expressed from the point of view of a very high tantric kind of way of looking at things, which might be a little bit harder to relate to for ordinary folk, like some of ourselves. Karisona?
Mukangal Lagoyado, one there, Lagojayado, Cunning one there, making Manduis.
Yeah.
You know, tell the cheese origin, a country yagala.
Chisus origin. So one holy being in particular, he expressed that it is not as if in this country of Tibet there are not those who are reciting mantras and not those who are engaged in deity practice, but how wonderful if just a few of those people would practice the Dharma. That was his comment. And it's a little bit of a heavy observation if you think about it. So, Jojegi Lama. Jojegi Getro. So, sorry, just confused for a minute. I was like, I don't think. Okay, anyways. In terms of Atisha, right? Atisha, one of his masters was a great realized being, but he didn't teach very much, right? He didn't share many words. So one day, this teacher of Atisha, he uttered the words, careful, careful, karma is profound. Karma is profound. And so that was like a teaching from this Lama. They were like these very pith instructions. And Atisha, he really put that into practice, actually. When you look at his life, he paid special attention to karma, and at the end of every day, he would seriously reflect upon the karma that he had accumulated. Okay, so maybe we have gone a little bit too much of a digression, so now we shall turn to the text. So in terms of the author of the commentary that we're looking at, the author is Geshe Togme Sangpo. And Geshe said that certainly by now, Geshe Togme Sangpo is a Buddha. He's achieved Buddhahood. There's no doubt in his mind. And also certainly at the time that he wrote this text, he was already a bodhisattva, right? So we can have conviction in these instructions. So we are on page 1 of the commentary by Togme Sangpo, and in terms of what we covered up to last time, we're about midway down the page, and we just finished the quote from Arya Nagarjuna. Yeah. So this relates to an instruction from Arya Nagarjuna. So Geshe thinks it comes from the precious garland, but he's not sure. And this instruction lays out the 3 essentials for one who wishes to achieve Buddhahood. And they are bodhicitta, great compassion, and the wisdom realizing emptiness. So you know how to check this. Think about the practice that you're doing every day. Is the practice aimed at developing these minds of bodhicitta, great compassion, and wisdom realizing emptiness? So as we continue in the text, it's talking about Atisha's holy teachers. The great, precious, single divine Lord Atisha received instructions on cultivating bodhicitta from 3 main teachers. The Guru Dhammarakshita, who cut and gave away his own flesh. So this Guru Dhammarakshita, it was said that Atisha went to him because he possessed these profound instructions. He was the only one who possessed those instructions on bodhicitta. But in terms of the view, meaning understanding of emptiness, it is widely understood that actually Atisha's understanding of the view was more refined than Dhammarakshita's. So at that time, Dhammarakshita may have been a Sautantrika, or a holder of the Sutra school. Dodepa? Chedamawa. Ale, sorry. Vaibhasika, sorry. And so at that time, his understanding of emptiness was not so refined, although later on he would go to realize emptiness. So you could say that in the beginning of his life, Dhammarakshita was following the tenet system of the Vaibhasikas. And slowly, as he studied and meditated on the great treatises, Geshe said that Dhammarakshita would have come to higher views of understanding of emptiness. But his bodhicitta was so great that it was said that he would be able to easily cut a piece of his flesh and give it to a sentient being for their benefit without experiencing any difficulty. So that may be hard for us to kind of relate to or believe, but it is said that when one truly brings forth bodhicitta in that sense, right, that it becomes very easy to do things like that to benefit sentient beings. Don't try it as a beginner. Just to be clear, this is not something that we attempt as beginners, right, but this is something that those great beings are capable of. So we think in terms of our own body, right? We see our body as something really precious. So part of that relates to thinking that the body is the self, or the self is the body. We hold on to our physical form very tightly, don't we? But actually, this body had a very strange place of origin, because this body started to form when our mother's reproductive substances and our father's reproductive substances met, what in Buddhism we call the red and the white drops.
어다 던지기 잘라지로 다 롱진스티가 소속 돈보니 소속 연바라고 노아샤니라고 니 리스를 할 레빙한 수사지 소속이야.
And from that moment of conception, from the meeting of those two reproductive substances, immediately, right, once the consciousness enters that, then we start to think that this is the self, and we develop attachment for it. Even though the body is not fully formed yet, the self-cherishing is already there.
어다 던지지 대시우 또 베시워진 두아스 델타와 있는 롱진스도 제진스도 아제 제세다테 소소 공바이는 땡데요 다시래서.
So because of that, if we are able to see a little bit about how strange that actually is, then we can really see the faults of self-cherishing, which once again is that self-concerned attitude that causes us to neglect others. And we're able to see the advantages of cherishing others.
빼나 쳇파리츠리. 쳇파쇼도 쳇셔츠이나. 츠리데나 소소여사데 츠쇼로 왔어.
Yep.
파쇼 로스노 네 츠쇼 파리쳐서 왔어.
Yep. So if we think about two shores, right, on the side of like a riverbank, for example, when we're on the south side, we point to the north and we say that's the other shore. But when we're on the north side, we point to the south and we say that's the other shore. So what the other shore is depends upon where we're placed.
하고서 어다 대리고 나제 지와 때를 다 버게 녀래셔 발라 오코로 돈로야지 아레스. 돈로야지 아레스.
And so that kind of way of thinking, this can relate and help us with the practice of equalizing and exchanging self and others.
어다 돈을 전에 마트 다 서서 고마 마셔라 거가디나 지바데 되더라스. 제ser 칼레 카마스타.
But if we never question anything, if we just kind of grasp onto this, like we grasp onto this as our home and our house, nothing will change. gonda parsu sushor di jawa karidus dagje nyamshela. Ganso dila yores par dela yores tsula yores radi dagje nyamshe dang jawa karidus te treshi jamaswa.
gamata kala yunga.
Ale loso.
Mesen rongo desatel je desatel rongo pandone tani je wajayo was yes date.
Loso.
Chi pat tipala tene kon jawato duas.
Yeah. So self and others is a changing things, just like the two sides of that water, and whichever we are holding as closer to us just depends upon our perspective. In other words, it's changeable.
This way. Alendivache tante kache kawane otini leswa. Tani o nganzo ya kazonga malake jamo woshuso. Lowi inye inayo. Tombo tele pashishe ramawa. Tenen dodeba. Tenen setomba. O koramba jatale ndoswasia.
So same, just as we talked about Dharmarakshita kind of coming to these more refined understandings of emptiness. In the same way, it is said that Vasubandhu started off as a Vaibhasika, then became a Sautantrika, then became a Chittamantran, and eventually came to the middle way. And actually, as Vasubandhu sort of came to a higher understanding of the view of emptiness, it is said that he actually fell into a little bit of a conflict with one of his teachers. And his teacher was like a really strong kind of proponent or advocate of the Vaibhasika system.
Lama shombe nanjo ba shisha wa yenjo dunga dala ngisle ni ba lama selimba to sole thoba lendi menga tse warwa the lama selimba le taji big luisa.
So as we continue, the Guru Maitri Yogi, who was able to take others' sufferings directly upon himself, and the Guru of Suvarnadvipa. Here, what follows is the tradition of the Suvarnadvipa Guru. So Suvarnadvipa is the Sanskrit name of this Lama, but you'll often hear him referred to as Serlingpa in Tibetan. And Maitri Yogi holy because he was able to really actualize taking the sufferings of others upon himself. And that might be something that initially seems like hard to believe, but actually the history of this is explained in his biography. So there was, for example, a hunter chasing a sentient being, like maybe a rabbit or something, and he shot that arrow, and the Lama was so strongly meditating upon taking on the sufferings of others that he actually had the wound that arrow would have caused himself. And so he was kind of like very upset, and sort of the Lama sort of fell over in pain. But his students initially, not realizing what was happening, they thought he was behaving like a bit of a weirdo, and they started laughing at him actually. But then he took off like the part of his robe to show them where the wound from the arrow was, to really demonstrate to his students the sign that he had actualized this practice of taking on the suffering of others. And there's also stories of great lamas who even kind of would die from when sentient beings were going to be killed. They would take on their suffering, and they would actually die through their practice of taking and giving. And so actually this practice of cause and effect is not something that is easy. Pardon me, just give me the moment to adjust something. So then we can see from those stories that like taking and giving, right, when one becomes very advanced, one can actually take on the suffering of others. So mainly here, though, the tradition that we are looking at is that of Suvarna Dvipa. So Suvarna Dvipa, Dvipa means island, and I think Survana is like a golden hue. So it's the golden island, which is Indonesia, just in case you're curious. And in fact, it was said that in order to meet Serlingpa in Indonesia, actually, Atisha had to go on a very dangerous journey by boat. It was said it took a 12-month journey from where Atisha was to get to where Serlingpa was. It was said that, in fact, they encountered many obstacles, even sea monsters and other things, like, you know, that Atisha was in danger over the course of this journey many, many times. And Serlingpa, he also possessed a certain level of clairvoyance. So even from the point that Atisha embarked on the journey 12 months earlier, he was telling his students to prepare, because they would be receiving a very important guest who would become his student. So actually, there are, when great beings pass away, right, there is talk of receiving their successor. So, for example, if we think about J. Milarepa, Lord Milarepa, it was said that at the time that he was passing away, some of the students were like, well, we need to know who's going to be like the successor, who is going to hold this Dharma lineage. And he said, just wait, you know, that person is going to come. And so all of those students, right, like the VIPs, they were kind of like gathered around Milarepa and thinking like, which one of us is it going to be, you know, kind of thing. And so from amongst those students, in fact, there were several people that carried on the lineage, and they were called the disciple who is like the moon, the disciple who is like the sun, and so forth. But in fact, the initial successor, who was not there at that particular meeting, was Venerable Gampopa. And when Venerable Gampopa kind of arrived at the last minute, Milarepa passed the lineage to him. And so in that way, like if we speak about a successor of Milarepa's teachings, from that point of view, it was actually Gampopa. There are many different, so we're back to the text. There are many different ways of presenting this instruction, but the tradition of Geshe Chekowa follows 7 points.
오다 게시 작가와 전부 단달라마 짜치모 되어 또 뭐, 당아를 해질을 되네, 당어, 그녀를 전부지 손에 철을 되네, 봐.
So when we think about Geshe Chekowa, in fact, he was a great Lama who was inclined to retreat. And from the, actually, at the initial part of his journey, he was thinking that I should focus on the practice of Tantra. So I will engage in mantra retreat in like an isolated retreat place. So Geshe Chekowa was kind of proceeding actually on his journey, right, to go into retreat, and somehow or another he heard mention of the 7-point mind training instruction. And so he thought, who is emphasizing this 7-point mind training instruction as their main practice? And it was said that he kind of put his other practices kind of aside, stopped emphasizing them so much, and really dedicated himself to the practice of mind training. So why are we mentioning this story here? Because we know that from the point of view of practice, it is so very important to really emphasize the development of love, compassion, and bodhicitta. These are the instructions here. These are also the instructions of Lama Tsongkhapa. So it is very important to strive to be stable in those practices. So all of the holy gurus, they kind of agree on this point, that if one does not have a firm foundation in the 3 of definite emergence or renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, if one has not thoroughly trained in this, then whatever mantra one recites, whatever deity practice one engages in, it will not be able to bring forth the result. So if we look at our practice of mantra as being like this meal that we enjoy, right? It gives us nourishment, but what actually gives the meal taste is our prior training in renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. So that's why every single tantric practice, the visualization begins with what words? From the sphere of emptiness, or from within emptiness. It always begins there.
Oi tandi so ale motra so ta te la yo tene ta te de te kare se nge do tenji chi te ma ngi ji shonju ji se jong wa nge shonju lo te chewa che ji ge nyo le tene te ma lo ju yi se lo ju ge ton se lo ju ge la ja to den jo ta ton bo nge do ta la.
So as we continue with the text, Geshe Chekowa follows 7 points: the preliminary teachings of the supporting instructions, the main practice of training in bodhicitta, how to bring adversity onto the path to enlightenment, how to practice throughout one's whole life, the measure of mind training, the commitments of mind training, and the precepts of mind training. So we begin with the preliminaries.
So we are
now on page 2 of the commentary, continuing. First, train in the preliminaries. This consists of 3 contemplations on the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages, on death and impermanence, and on the trials of samsara. So in other words, the disadvantages of cyclic existence.
단조지 물린도 토발라 저게와 벌써 주바 저기라 센제전노나 게와 노다 저바 뉴이 지부 단조 토바 깔라 단로라 수반도와 예라 티나 단조 토바 시조도 되발레 다기 다리 단조 토바데 대메바 먼저와 신노다지 셰기노다 곰.
So, for the first, we contemplate the following: To obtain the support for practicing the Dharma, a human body with its freedoms and advantages, we must have accumulated the cause, which is abundant virtue. Among sentient beings, very few practice pure virtuous action, and this means that the resultant freedoms and advantages are difficult to gain. If we consider other beings, such as animals, we can appreciate just how rare it is to find the freedoms and advantages. Therefore, now that we have these freedoms and advantages, we must not allow them to go to waste, but use them to practice the one pure Dharma. So this is a beautiful instruction because it shows us exactly how we must meditate. What is the first thing that we think about? And as we contemplate that, what is the conclusion that we want to arise in the mind? And also we need to appreciate that this human rebirth isn't the result of just one cause, right? We need 2 causes, 3 causes, immeasurable causes to be able to achieve this human rebirth. So it's the result of great endeavor. And so those who are able to actually engage in the necessary effort to accumulate these causes of a human rebirth, they are few in number. And so how can we come to this conclusion? Well, think about how many human beings there are. It might seem like there's a lot, but if you lift up just one stone and see how many insects are living under it, how many more countless are the insects? These can give one the idea of a perfect human rebirth. Sorry. Itchy nose today. What can I do? Hay fever happens. Okay. And let's take another angle for looking at this. Say that you ran into a person today who said that you were just like a dog, who called you a dog, and think about how upset and angry that would make you. In fact, if somebody called us something like that, like most of us, our response would be, we want to say something like equally terrible to them that is going to make them feel just as bad as how they made us feel. It's just one syllable and one word, dog, but think about how powerful that is when we say it. If you're unable to bear it, even when somebody compares you to a dog, think about if you were reborn as a dog and had to endure all the mistreatment dogs often endure. How would you be able to bear that if you can't even bear somebody being angry and calling you that now? So this is another example of how we can think about these other rebirths within samsara and how we can think about how special and rare a human rebirth is. So the cows, the dogs, the ants, all of the insects and so forth, they want to be happy in exactly the same way that we do, but they don't have kind of like the facilities and the capacities to achieve that happiness. So that's pitiable, yeah? We might think of like the spoiled dog in the rich family, right? And it has like a relatively good life. But compare that to all of the street dogs. Compare that to all of the animals that have to like work in the fields and so forth. And think about the great suffering that all of those beings endure.
오다 던디 자치 따와 있는 때는 니네 할래 하지래 되가래 단조세대 자치 뭐여 봐 도바 까와 봐 오다 대 출라는 출라 전부지래.
So if we think about it in that way, we'll really see how kind of significant a human rebirth with all of the freedoms and advantages is. And the idea of this awareness is that it brings forth this determination, I'm not going to waste it.
오다 예 소설 먼저 이 소설을 디텐려고 땡데지 버게
And think, like, in terms of what I have done with this human rebirth, what I have done in my life, have I done enough to know that the doors to the three unfortunate states of existence are really closed off? Have I done that?
다 밀리터가 그렇게 따다지면 예대들이 있으는 게 뭐셔 깨자리 가서 자세 통해서 뭐 날에서도만 요와스 밀리터가 때는 때자지 못 토야가 니빠지면 지메나 영이 예대들이 있을 때 칸에서 보시는 다 되게 뭐셔 깨자리
수라선데
자세 통해서 뭐
So Geshe Togme Sampo, the author of our text, he joked that if you look back on your activities and you can't even be sure that you've done enough to achieve a human rebirth next lifetime, then talking about achieving the welfare of others and benefiting them is almost like a joke.
가르죠 그냥
Enseñamos eres, la usamos. Gamosho eres.
Yeah.
He was telling me, I'm like, no, you did say joke. He's like, oh yeah, I did. Yes. Mare, soso kewa jema milu rinpoche totugi dende menana, dene mi ropa che gamosho eres. Dilaso. Okay, yes, just checking. It's correct. Yeah. So actually this, also you'll find this saying of Togme Sampo in the 37 Practices of Bodhisattvas. It's another great text by Togme Sampo. So there, Togme Sampo says that we need to be sure that we can abandon the 10 non-virtuous activities if we're going to get a human rebirth. If we can't even be sure that we've abandoned negativities enough to achieve that human rebirth, then it is laughable to talk about achieving the benefit of others.
아니 달라마 거로 밀리터바 까오레자 내셔 먹어 잤을 때 알라마 거로 자는 논이면 돼 아스지
So Geshe was saying also, though, from these teachings it can be a little bit, we might be a little bit puzzled. So one Lama, he went to one of the great cities in China, right, where there was so many people, and he said they talk about the rarity of a human rebirth, but people haven't been to a city like this, obviously. Because when you look at those, huge populated places, it seems like a human rebirth, there's a lot of them, right? Yeah, so Geshe said he reflected on this one time when he was in Delhi, right, which is just an absolutely massive capital city of India, and he was kind of on a place where he could view everything, and he said there were so many human beings, it almost looked like tiny ants busily kind of moving about, and he thought, wow, there's a lot of human rebirths there. Yeah. So it really difficult to achieve a human rebirth in general, and in terms of achieving a human rebirth with the 8 freedoms and the 10 advantages or richnesses, that is even more difficult. So we meditate on these points and then we think, taking all of this into account, I have achieved this precious human rebirth, which is rare. Therefore, I must not waste it. The best way not to waste it is to apply myself in the practice of pure Buddha Dharma, right? This is the conclusion of that contemplation. So then the next one is death and impermanence. We're continuing with the text. Meditate on how life is uncertain and there are many circumstances which can lead to death, so that we cannot be certain we will even survive the day. We must therefore put all our energy into the sacred Dharma right now.
다 간조 간가 보고 말와 다 보기 주시나 있는데 더 참아도 버시기로 오가 기고 뭐드사 라시기로 마도 다 되게 말해.
So Geshe said, don't be like, don't have a childlike attitude towards this and be like, death and impermanence, that's uncomfortable. I don't want to hear about it, right? As a mature Dharma practitioner, receiving teachings on death and impermanence is really important.
다 뭐도 봐 사태 가 체조지스가 야래 다 토마라 가쳐. 다 바달라 가쳐. 타말라요 가쳐.
In fact, the teachings on impermanence, how things are not lasting, this is a teaching that is important in the beginning. It's a teaching that is important in the middle, and it's a teaching that is important in the end.
하고서 어다 데이자 빼나 벨이나 벨 파마르지 다시와 시만 로비깔라 뿌기질도 다 마고 바는 드리지쇼 드리지쇼는 가서 가지라고 저기 말했어.
야부코마소.
나 소소 맨로 그러와시 시만 로 그러와시 소소 뿌기 되라 소소 내가 야본들이 조가래 마천로도 야본들이 조가래 라자라고 자그레스
자그레스 제제 되네
라마 야보 메 파마 야보던데가 하고서
야부코마소 돈다
세시오 생에세도와
세보면
돼 파마 야보던데이나
예
쇼와 시만 로 그러와스 로비깔 카제스 카제 좋아서리 소소 뿌기 되라
야
나도 메비깔 소소 내가 드리제 가르다 마천 야본들이 조가르다서
So at the time in Tibet, when a father or mother, when parents knew that they were near to passing away, there would be kind of like the death advice. In other words, instructing the children of the family, like after I pass away, like be a good person. This is what one should cultivate. And also this is how one should continue the affairs of the family. And so actually, the holy beings say that the main parting advice of the Buddha was cultivate impermanence. That's the instruction for all of us as his heirs. And also, if we think about the teaching career of the Buddha, the first teaching that he gave was also about impermanence. So he gave advice from impermanence at the beginning of his teaching career, and he gave advice on impermanence when he passed away from this world, when he went into Parinibbana. So if you become mindful of impermanence, whether you can spend a lot of time with your Dharma teacher or not is not so important, because you will always have a teacher in front of you with these teachings on impermanence who is guiding you to the Dharma.
다 이제 민지 깔래 가보주고 손을 또 말다. 손을 든릴 따니 손을 또냐라. 단단히네 기워렌데. 아 처음에 봐 손을 또 그미 기워게네렌데. 다 여봉게네렌데. 유서 마주 소화용이 알았어.
And also, we don't necessarily need to make it a heavy thing, because when we contemplate impermanence, we're contemplating the more difficult kind of transitions of life. That also lets us see that actually right now, my situation is quite good. I haven't met those challenges yet, so I have this perfect opportunity to work on creating my happiness. So all of the noise that we create in our minds, the worries about the things that aren't going according to plan, our stress and so forth, when we think about death and impermanence and facing that, it puts everything into context, and whatever might have been bothering us, that can be subdued. So these teachings on death and impermanence are easy to understand, accessible to put into practice, and one of the greatest assists on the path. Awareness of death and impermanence will help us give perspective of the obstacles that we'll inevitably encounter in samsara, and what once seemed like a big deal, like an insurmountable thing, we'll see that it's actually really not such a big deal at all. Through our study and practice, we want to be a happier, more content person, and by thinking about that we haven't yet faced these major challenges on the path. We are in a good situation. This will help us to be happier.
다 데레 다 선발 아사 게딜 게딜레 지부 데든 주와 수비 디파 터치 봉시 아니 예치데레
Geshe thinks I'm not laughing at him at all, right? It's just when he was reading the text, I was just thinking, I was trying to read this in Tibetan the other day, and I was like, oh my God, that's a mouthful. So I also saw that it's like a mouthful for Geshe, so I didn't feel so bad. That's all. That's all. So it makes me feel like, yeah, a little bit more encouraged.
So
Geshe says, like in practice here, like in the teaching, I'm very polite, but sometimes I reply. Not that often. It's not that bad. He's kidding. He's kidding. So the trials of samsara, consider how it is taught that virtuous and unwholesome actions result in pleasure and pain, and how we must therefore avoid all unwholesome actions and practice virtue as much as possible. So just relating this to the Lam Rim outlines, the root of all happiness, observing the law of cause and effect, or the root of all happiness, observing the law of karma. In Lama Tsongkhapa's outlines, there's only two topics which are considered the root of all happiness. This teaching on cause and effect is one of those two. So root of all happiness, we could also say root of all happiness and goodness, observing the law of cause and effect. And so this is a root because these teachings on cause and effect on karma are so unbelievably important. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. So, if we think about the merits that we've accumulated as like a ball of yarn, if we think about it as a ball of yarn, the example that the holy beings give is that if we have it like if we don't observe the law of cause and effect, it's like we take one end of that ball of yarn and let it go. And eventually it will become completely unraveled.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is something really to be aware of, because it might seem like somebody has a nice ball of yarn, right? They have a very rich practice. But if we've been in the Dharma for any time, we know that somebody who we might have really thought was like very advanced, a very dedicated practitioner, sometimes they lose interest in Dharma completely, right? This happens. So it's like because they weren't observing the basics, like the teachings on cause and effect, it's like they were just holding on to one little string of the Dharma and everything else became unraveled until they were left with nothing.
So if
we don't have faith in cause and effect in karma, that will be the effect on our practice. But if we have a stable conviction in cause and effect, then similarly we will have stability in our practice. So now we are turning to the teachings on Tsongkhapa's dependent in praise of dependent arising. Nisajerbe. Ale, los.
Cheji disunye kondo no yoro ngen la shwa cheji chita temba la gowa ge cho chita te la manya ba sumba yon deni jine le ba ko
Yang Sundang?
chechi chita tembala gowan gi jo chita la manya ba sumba yo deni juna leba kum
Yeah. So once again, I'm sorry, I'm not happy with our translation. So we're on verse 28. So I'm just going to read the translation from the book I have because I think it'll be more clear. I'm not finding fault. It's just when I read it, it confuses me. And if that happens, I won't be able to translate well. So I'll read how I have it here. Furthermore, you taught that no debater could reasonably find fault with your teaching nor defeat you. It is this very teaching that renders them silent.
This one, what I mean, Kalakawoke Mare. Chechi chita tembala sere tumba to tenjuri chipare sekecha moshes was.
That you taught that. So in terms of what was taught, we are talking about the teachings on dependent arising and emptiness.
Oh, ta chi kangalolo ruji tumbare. Ina yo tenjuri. Things
are empty, but at the same time that things are empty, they arise in dependence upon other conditions. Results arise from those causes. So we have to come to a point where these two can be understood.
Seri bachaba ina teleta shi gaze zawa ina shi raya mare na moji
kare tenjung de
tumba to ruji chiba ya mare
yeah
ina tenju re yechil tibare se de ate mo kanga ta kheba shiwo cha ketel nyoda sheba ina tenda se wa yo thori ya mare.
So in terms of these teachings of emptiness of inherent existence, in terms of these teachings on emptiness of true existence, combined with that understanding of dependent arising, if we really look at this, it's doubtful that even a scientist would be able to completely dismiss that. So no debater could reasonably find fault. So that's what Geshe is saying. No person of sober mind who tries to penetrate that the harmony of dependent arising and emptiness could find fault in this teaching.
Why
this is the very teaching that renders them silent. They are rendered silent due to the flawless reasoning of the harmony of dependent arising and emptiness.
This one,
Yep. So really seeing the harmony of dependent arising and emptiness, this is very significant because it is the view that sets us on that completely correct path and allows us to forge ahead.
What is So, if you ask why so, it is because of this explanation of dependent arising. It dispels any chance to exaggerate or deny the status of entities seen and unseen. This one?
So I'll just read from the other text, so I don't want to confuse you guys. This part I'm following. How? Because its explanation casts away all possibility of flawed assertion and faulty denial of all phenomena evident or hidden. That should be the translation you guys have. Oh,
this one,
So seen and unseen. So seen are those phenomena that are directly in front of us, houses, trees, and so forth. So there are these seen phenomena. There's three categories: seen, hidden, and extremely hidden. So first we're talking about those that we can perceive. Yeah. And so in unseen phenomena, we break this down further into two categories: hidden unseen phenomena and extremely hidden unseen phenomena.
하고서를 자진네 서서 대할비 같이 머리 갈래갈 자진네서研究 공조 신도 공조.
So this is a really important thing actually to keep in mind, that there are these three categories of phenomena in this presentation. Seen or evident phenomena, that's the first, and unseen hidden phenomena, and unseen extremely hidden phenomena.
어다 동바도 땡준이가 내서대 단가 가정만 가족 개장 모시에 자송와스 내 내서대 버게 따다지 말아나 될 돈도도 근데 그 내서다 만나 용기 아래스
에 야보이 고마송.
세시오스 동바도 땡준이 따다지 단 가족시에바 노지 소화 마시나 아니 야자서 디와스
자자숨
될 저절로 돈도 아니 근데
And so if we do not penetrate this teaching of the harmony of dependent arising and emptiness of inherent existence, then we are in great danger of the reification, so making them seem more than they are, and also the deprecation going on the side of non-existence of all of these categories of phenomena, both seen, unseen hidden, and unseen extremely hidden.
다 동바가 땡주를 주어시 땡주가 동바를 주어시면 내한테 가제 저와도 버게지 통소나 던지가 돈도도 근데 강갈더니 다 리리리 바이노 그래.
So if we can see how emptiness underpins the teachings on dependent arising, and how dependent arising is an assisting factor underpinning the teachings on emptiness, this will be an antidote to our tendency to exaggerate or to deprecate these various categories of phenomena.
빠데 다와 트라피고 녜녜에서 타두된 대신 잡을까라 서로서대 다와테 베드레 메바도 터치바 나고 쳐도 땡이 저로서 내바시야 말해.
So Chandrakirti, when expressing this view of the middle wave, right, he said that I am not doing this with the thought of defeating you or insulting you. However, by proclaiming this view, all of your views will be rendered mistaken.
어단 조미용이나 라마존가 빠르게더니 라마존가 안에 빠데 다와 트라피게 되니 류테 간디스리 야레스
So at the time when Lama Tsongkhapa was contemplating the works of the glorious Chandrakirti, we know that he had some help from Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom. And when he was checking his understanding of Chandrakirti's text, then Manjushri said something like, the works of Chandrakirti are certainly unmistaken.
그래서 어다 던지지 이제 다 간저 던지고 다 따와들 파게 가서 터다 다 시라시나 마시나 알레 로토야테 다 가서 뭐래.
So whether we're able to completely arise the wisdom from these teachings or not, just to be able to encounter these teachings on the view of emptiness and dependent arising and contemplate them a little bit, this makes us very fortunate. So thank you very much. Just covering one verse of that teaching on dependent arising. So we will pause and do the dedications. Please, people, if you need to get on with the rest of your day after the dedications, feel free, but we'll also have time for questions and answers afterwards.
Jangjo semjo rinpoche maje banam chejo rechi chewa nyamba meba yang gone gondu pewa sho Tawa rinpoche maje banam chejo rechi chewa nyamba meba yang gone gondu Pewar Sho. Next one down, Dave. Jumpel, the ones. Yeah, that one. Jumpel Pao Jidar Kemba Tong Kundu Zambo Deyan Dejin De Da Gungi Jesu Dalo Chir Gewa Dida Tamje Rabdungo Dusun Shebe Gewa Tamje Gi La chodo ngaba de dagi gewe tsawa di kun kyang zambo joji rabdu ngowargi.
Marosu terisa bi gawati zipi da roje kangi kesa kangi sa tsawa da sa shimba kangi china di tala tiene da to melindi da
So on the basis of this merit that all of us have accumulated together today, as well as on the basis of all the merit of both self and others, all the merit of positivity others have accumulated, may the current problems of this world, the wars, conflict, famines, pandemics, and so forth, be completely cleared away. In particular, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but indeed all other teachers who are teaching the genuine path. Any such teachers, may they have long and stable lives, free from obstacles. In order for me to practice love, to practice compassion, to bring forth bodhicitta, I need to have stable mental and physical health. Through these merits, may I have the stability of mental, physical, and physical health necessary for practice. Through these merits, may any negativity accumulated from beginningless samsara until now be completely purified and cleared away. So we'll pause there. Are there any questions at this point? Do I have a question? No. No. For a change, I do not today. So I do see a question from Chris on the screen. Can you read it to me, Dave? Because I can only see part of what, my vision's not that great.
Yep. So I can, there's also several from Facebook and some earlier as well. But we'll start with Chris here. You need to accumulate great merit to hope to have a chance at having a precious human...
Put your mic closer to your face, maybe. Sorry, I can't hear you.
You can't hear me. Okay. Yeah. Is that better?
I'm gonna... It's very faint for some reason today, but yeah, no, go ahead. I think I can hear you well enough now.
Yeah. If you need to accumulate great merit to hope to have a chance of having a precious human rebirth, why are some humans born in terrible conditions?
So, yes, okay, so I'm just going to read the question out again. So if you have to accumulate great merit to achieve a human rebirth, why do some human beings endure terrible conditions? So milu rinpoche gi chedu sonam gya chenpo sa guna yangs dene mi kashi halepe tunchen kyopo dang dunge chenpo kare chene kyegi resa. Mi mambochi konso milu rinpoche nganso gewa chenpo gogire duas konso gewa chenpo saparesi ne konso milu di halepe kange chenpo dang kale kapo dang dunge chenpo re duasa
ta te yon koroso jama tswa isa mali topi koroso jaya poso arte ta te le tene
rinpoche de
o ta zebado.
So we would say that they have accumulated the main cause of a human rebirth, but they have not accumulated the perfect cause. Sorry, they have not accumulated the complete cause of a perfect human rebirth. So what that means is they may have the foundation of ethics there, but they didn't practice generosity. They didn't practice patience. They didn't practice the other parts of the path. So that's why they have that result. So that's why we really say that, in addition to our practice of ethics, it's really important to have an attitude of generosity, to engage in offerings and so forth, because that creates the cause to also have good conditions in the subsequent rebirth. Where it said that if we are a very generous person and we're giving away a lot of generosity, but we're not practicing the ethics of abandoning the 10 non-virtues, then the danger is being reborn as in the rich family's dog, right? So you have really good conditions, but you don't have the human rebirth.
Shawanga Malay in May College and Batoni College Ayate, Tin Jivute, Tandogitel Mato Cocoa Maris.
Lagi.
Shawanga Mal College as one kitchen Batoni Yola, which is once.
Yeah.
Tatin Jivute,
Yeah.
Tam Jivutsi may be called Tandogitel me as once.
Yeah. So that person may have been a human being in that previous rebirth who was engaged in the practice of generosity, but because they didn't guard their ethics at all, the result of that generosity is being reborn as a dog, just being reborn as a dog in a rich family's home.
What ya Mateji Pares, Tani Kazanga Madricia Saimbas, Sonji Zombalila Yopika, Sonji Korotumba Yosa, Sashu Wasati, Chokakanga, Pokanga Yamachil.
So there's the story that Geshe is told often from the Buddha's time, and it was a story where there was a war, and all of the male people of that particular settlement, they were wiped out, right? They were killed.
Yeah.
And then as a result of this, because some of Ananda's relatives were in that settlement, Ananda, the Buddha's main attendant, right? He was despondent. He wasn't eating, and he looked very depressed. And so the Buddha, he was clairvoyant, so he already knew this, but thinking that this might be instructive, he asked Ananda, "O Venerable One, why are you so despondent?"
So
Ananda said, "I'm despondent because all of the male inhabitants of my settlement, of my village, were killed, and this makes me very sad." And so the Buddha tells the story of all of the male inhabitants of that village in a previous lifetime. And their collective karma was that they had taken a sea creature. I think they say like fish, but I think it's like more like a whale. And they had kept it alive, but they would continuously peel parts of its flesh off so that they could use it. And that was the result that they were enduring was because of that. Yeah. So there was that great sort of karma that the inhabitants of that village in the previous lifetime had accumulated, right? And even the Buddha was not able to purify that. Yeah. So because a cause and effect is enduring and also very subtle, you know, these stories are like very instructive. So in response to this question also, we need to kind of delineate a human rebirth and a human rebirth with all of the freedoms and advantages, right? So a human rebirth with all of the freedoms and advantages, that's even something different. Yeah. So people can have a human rebirth, but it's a human rebirth without those freedoms and advantages that we mention here. Yeah. So hopefully that answers Chris's question. I don't know if Chris is there, but hopefully that answers. Okay, good. Yes. Okay, I see the answer. Okay, great. Yes. Thanks.
Okay, so there's a question from David Ott very early on. David, do you want to answer?
Dave, I'm really sorry. I'm not trying to be difficult, but okay. I literally only hear a murmur from you.
Okay. There's a question from David Ott, and David's here. David, do you want to ask your question? Yeah. I don't see him unmuting, so I'll try to ask his question.
Is he speaking, Dave? I'm thinking, sorry, maybe the problem's from my end then if he's speaking, because I can't hear the other person either.
No, David is not. There he is.
Okay, now somebody can hear me.
I can hear David.
Okay. So my question was, and is, when I hear that we do not perceive the Dakini directly, am I correct in understanding that this actually means that we don't perceive someone who is a Dakini that we happen to encounter as a Dakini, though they may be, and in fact, they may have been around us because of our connection to the Dharma and helping us all along. So, in other words, to be succinct, we may meet a person, they may be a realized being, a Dakini even, but we won't know that. Yes? Can I be clearer?
Yes, no, I can hear. So, okay. I apologies to Dave, actually, because Dave, the problem was not with you. The problem was when we plugged in the new microphones, I think it completely took over our audio setup. So I had to adjust the settings to the other speaker.
For the audio output,
And also, sorry. So apologies to Dave, and also apologies to the person who just spoke. I'm going to ask you to repeat yourself. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
When we encounter the Dakini, we do not see them directly. Am I correct in thinking that this means that if we do encounter a being who is realized or who is a Dakini, they may in fact be as such, and they're specifically helping us all along, but we have not yet the realization or the level of understanding or actualization to perceive them as such.
Yes. Okay, sir. Thank you. Yes, thanks for repeating.
If I may add, might we perhaps at some point in retrospect, in perhaps some lifetime, realize who they were?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you for restating the question. I think I got it. Nganso tambo le tambo yin sang rwa nganso di ngone ne so tongmi tupa rwa di chikche. Dene de la tene nganso di tokpa yogen kebu dampa yingen su yindang mayin yewache tugimen duas. Di yinayang chichena nganso dang nyamdu rokpa chik yore konso tambo ne kadi ne rokpa chegi yore si ne nganso di kandesla gare jipa dinso yotsang tong tugimen duas di chik yong sigires. Ane di no yong nayang nganso nyamlen tets towa drodu dene nganso nguma ngoshepa di gegen sa champores mit sa champores hakoye chik yore besa. Korangi chiwa dire.
다 대도 메소소 버게시라 체토올레나도 고고로 버게 하고 해지 와라와스
re ine konganso dangyamdu yo sigire rwa ine hamakone. So absolutely, and in fact there are many stories of people being aided by greatly realized beings who were not able to see that, and only after they were able to kind of refine their wisdom were they able to appreciate those beings or appreciate that help.
어따 던지지 자 설레이나요 더니 되게가 당긴이 그만가서 검자를 때스게 주소와서 현재 설레이나요 다 돈을 그마도 어따 콘솔을 다 기자 매바도 다 드리잖아 어디는 다시부터 받더니 체스기를 와셔도.
And in this context, actually, Geshe said that what we started with at the beginning of the day of not looking down on any sentient being, of seeing every sentient being according to their potential and not disregarding any sentient being. In the light of this, that they could be a greatly realized being or bodhisattva, but we don't realize it. This becomes even more important, doesn't it? And even amongst those with animal forms, there are possible emanations of bodhisattvas. So then it becomes even more important to consider. And the texts advise us, actually, we don't know who could be a holy being or the emanation of a holy being. Therefore, we should always guard against harmful conduct or disrespect with any sentient being. We need to be very aware of our behavior. So absolutely possible that there has been somebody there of realization who has been helping us. But because of our obscurations, we can't see it. Then, when our positive qualities become more developed, we realize that there was such a person. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for the question.
It enriches my understanding.
Okay, great. Yeah, ko koya Ngodrup so tujishesa.
We had two questions coming in from Facebook earlier.
Yes, loud and clear. Hear you loud
Okay,
and clear.
great. So Jeff Zinderdine asked two questions. With regard to Maitre Yogi, who gave away his flesh, Jeff is asking, how is that not abusing the aggregates?
Yes, yes. Nganso tambo di nganso di kandesla guret Georgia gi gegen chik neljor chik jampa neljor ming chik duwa rwa ko semshen jendagla shate swa di nganso pungbo tongchung ma chia gi kelen chik yore ngaki nangla di pungbo nyotra te kandes maresa ko di samro tangire duwa rwa korang di pungbo nögire du di no chogyo mares ngak nangla
ale me ta te dembare
So there is a point. Geshe said, clever question. Yes, there is a point.
me ta te a 그 거럴 강에 니지를 못 잡아지 디칼다 대가 추주야 그 조 첨부 좀 요나 원여라요 말와스 거럴.
But the point is, if you're at a realization where you can do that with your aggregates and that's not going to cause you any suffering, in fact, by doing that, granting your flesh like that to benefit sentient beings, it's a great accumulation of merit. So rather than harming your practice, it'll actually be an assist.
하고서 기빠 첨부면을 당가서 다가서 소소스 볼 통치소알 졸라도나 대주고요 말이야.
But for us as ordinary, right, these precepts are more important because we often, without reason, abuse our aggregates in many different ways, right? So as Vajrayana practitioners, we need to avoid doing that.
Okay. And then the second question from Jeff, was regarding the story of the Lama who's doing Tonglen and then received the arrow wound when the rabbit was shot.
Yeah.
Jeff says, Shakyamuni said we only experience the fruits of our own actions. How then can we take on the suffering of others?
Yes, so one of the laws of karmas. Nganso the true agenda chik dua dene Jeff seria di re roa ngoma di tonglen nyamlen chia gilama chik di kandesa gre chik dane roa dene ko malep so roa ine tompa chom den de sana nganso legi drebu nganso mato nyom ge nyomares nganso jengi drebu nyom tugyo mares sur len tugyo mares dene di mitumpa mare besa.
다 대우 거럽하게 랜드가 내서 티사보사본 대화요 봐도 다 던지고 이제 뭐지라 되는 또
셈첸디도 알레
센질레사 보겠지 알아.
So yes, absolutely, but there could be an exception here, and the exception here would be that the Lama who is practicing Tonglen, not only their practice is advanced, but that particular animal that they were able to take on the suffering for, they had a very close karmic connection with it. And also they could have a collective karma relationship with that particular animal in terms of they may have been engaged in the same sort of, for example, negative action at the same time, which allows him to carry that over. But absolutely, Jeff is completely right that if there was not some shared basis of collective karma with that particular animal, you wouldn't have had that manifestation of them being able to really take on that suffering. So Geshe said, like, this is really his feeling from his own kind of reflection on this, but he thinks that when beings are engaged in accumulating collective karma together, it can kind of result in phenomena like this. So hopefully that answered. And it actually says this in the teachings too, right? Like when we think about when someone's passed away, right? It is said that if we accumulate merit for somebody who's passed away and we dedicate to them, if we had a close relationship, like parent-child or teacher-student with that person, it is said that at least some of the positive potential we accumulate, we can dedicate it to that person, right? And it's not the main factor, but it can be an assisting factor which helps to ripen that positive potential and assist the person who passed away. So hopefully that answered part of Jeff's question, but feel free to ask back. I think I see another hand, but can't see who it is. Is it Yolisa?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
me.
go ahead, Yolisa.
Hi. I have an echo, but anyway, what I wanted to ask was, you know, I just got an echo. I don't just got a really bad echo.
Okay.
It's not bothering us, but if you want to wait, we can come back to you, Yolisa.
Is there somebody else?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's a question from Katia Di Bernardini in Facebook.
Yes, let's take Katya's question first, then Dave, and we'll come back to you, Lisa.
Okay, so the question is, in which sense to do generate the body, we have first to be able to reincarnate humans? Are not there animal bodhisattvas as example? Thank you and long live.
I don't think I
Sure.
understood the question.
In which sense to do generate the body, we have first to be reincarnate humans? So I guess the question is, do you have to be a human being in order to generate bodhicitta?
Yes, thank you. Sorry. Okay, I got it now. Sorry about that. Okay, yes. Nganso the Jiangsu gisem kiela mi yingorebes karin sena Geshe la samsam dunro den so kiegire to asta bochik laos.
야, 나 이네 이거 말해. 우리 가시 야 뭐지 이거잖아 그랬더니.
So here actually there's differing opinions. Geshe would argue that you don't need a human to be a human being, to generate bodhicitta, but others would say that you do need to be a human being to generate bodhicitta. So the thing here to understand, though, is that when we see like those animals and so forth able to bring forth bodhicitta, that happens due to powerful imprints they accumulated in previous lifetimes ripening. Yidak mombo? Yeah. So the Buddha says in the sutras that, for example, those in preta or hungry ghost form are able to bring forth a wisdom realizing emptiness, a new realization of wisdom realizing emptiness.
Yeah. Del patache so gedela ta yuda mombo demba toningeso to bakandis you are yo marwaza patke jibigala de demore to maningeso to yo mares cheto
Ale
yudala
yo loso
to maningeso to yo mares
loso yine
yina yo to maningeso to jo jonju sel to batel gogres
Peko tongson konda
igo to yo mares to maningeso to ya dingel jonju se to garwas
mi impecable Dikadi ngolas.
Yida imika.
Ale, yida.
Misse도 쓰이나요?
Yeah.
또만 인해서도 또 대제 통로 토발라.
Yeah.
대행을 쇼지세 토박 토가라와.
Yeah.
오, 쇼지세 토발요 쇼아레스. 대로서노 또는 소지조 된데 돈ing에서도 또 바살라바레.
Sorry, konso jiangchu gisem tonglang drupayin sang dene rang chingi kandeslao kare tongi tope sherap chikyong kires. Ngangone kogimen dus konda.
Yeda soso niga mdiwas.
Kale sunda.
Sojiga doga nola 돈ing에서도 또 바요아레 자 지라바라was.
So in the Sutra of the Buddha, it says that those pretas can have a direct realization of emptiness.
다 이나요 대세한테 들어가로 말레스 된다 미게자.
But that shouldn't be taken literally.
전라마서 가르수요아레세나 돈만ing에서도 또 야티 녜녜러죠.
That what has happened is in a previous lifetime, those pretas or hungry ghosts had an imprint for being able to realize emptiness. And then at that time, so then when they realized bodhicitta as a hungry ghost, and Geshe already said bodhicitta can be realized by all 6 types of beings in samsara, right? So when they realized bodhicitta as a hungry ghost, that previous imprint for the wisdom realizing emptiness ripened. So that's the exception and why the Buddha said that hungry ghosts can have that realization. So this and in fact, this particular kind of example was given by Lama Jetsunpa, right? He's a great commentator who was the author of most of the texts that they study at Seraje. So we can understand from tracing back, therefore, that the hungry ghost can bring forth bodhicitta, the animals can bring forth bodhicitta. Indeed, any type of being can bring forth bodhicitta.
당가로서 단다 자 첨부 저야 손지 쪼된데도 저기 땜바 코로이나요. 쇼주스 세 사바 토사데. 그 가식에서는 야말래. 가식에서 이지 첨부래. 이래마 쇼주스 세 로마레스 드려요아레스.
And so in terms of Buddha Shakyamuni, it is said by some commentaries that he first gave rise to bodhicitta while in the hell realm, right, from seeing one of his companions being tortured. And others say that he first brought forth not bodhicitta, but great compassion in the hell realm. So certainly we can see that these realizations happen everywhere. Yeah. So even the word hell scares us, right? But it's not necessarily a completely negative thing if one has a positive imprint, because from seeing the suffering directly that beings are enduring there, that can be a cause for one bringing forth great compassion. And then on that basis, right, from bringing forth that realization of great compassion or bodhicitta, in the future one goes from happy rebirth to happy rebirth. So in answer to Kasha's question, any type of sentient being, whether in the lower realms, hungry ghost, animal, human being, can newly bring forth bodhicitta. But we have to understand the cause of that bodhicitta coming forth in that lifetime, right? It's not just everything that they did while in that animal rebirth. It's because they have powerful imprints, right, from many previous lifetimes of practice. So, yes, I think we are at the end of our time, but I see a couple more questions, so let's take a couple more questions.
Hi, I'm ready now.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Yolisa.
I wrote it down so that the echo won't bother me so much, but here it goes. It feels to me that the teachings are coming from a should or ideal place, but the reality is I haven't reached the stage of them yet. I sometimes find it discouraging when my reality is not consistent with the ideal. The reality is I struggle with anger, fear, and inconsistencies from a bodhicitta attitude. What method can I use to live from my own darkness?
Okay. Nganso sungsha kapula roa sungsha nangpe kapula kadine di cheju yores ane di cheju yores kadine tawatets topore dua roa nganso ningje kiegores jampa kadine nyargores roa jangchu sembi gilam drogo gire duas yene nguning nesu tadu roa nga datung lunglange yores roa nga semchuk chagi yores nga kangel chungi yores roa dene nganso di ngunegi nesu di dang sungsha di dabochik yogoreski kepar di khande samlo thangores. So Geshe said, in fact, that's why we start every, like this teaching session and so many others, thinking about the reasons we have to be happy.
And we
might not be able to live up to the ideals, but the instructions of how to bring forth love, how to bring forth compassion, how to engage in these various practices. Just because we don't meet the ideal doesn't mean there's nothing there that we can practice at all. So we start trying to be more loving, trying to be more compassionate with the sentient beings, the humans, and the animals that we're encountering every day. And that's already a great start. And also be practical about it, like when we're experiencing the afflictions. For example, you said anger. When does anger arise and how does it arise? With my personal process of this anger arising, how can I apply the antidote? How can I get in there to make sure I cultivate the antidote? Yeah, yeah. 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 So we're not saying that you need to be free of anger and free of attachment right from the beginning. We're just trying to apply those antidotes, right? We're trying to apply those antidotes as much as we can. And what we really need to think is, am I living my life in a good way? Am I doing my best to live my life in a ethical and practice-oriented way? And if we can do that, that's excellent.
아까서
로소.
마도 그 제가 고스를 그 중간가 큰이 돼 그래서 대세기요 말이에요.
총간에서 되거랬으나?
다 이제 갈강에 가르치는 대냐는 대가라면.
And also, practicing patience doesn't mean that we just take any abuse or difficulty that somebody lashes out to us, right? That's also not the case. So it's important also to have that perspective.
다 된다 준비를 하려다 놓고 하래스.
We just want to kind of do our best and be as honest as we can.
이 당긴 거 줄이는 가자라 계제시에서 통서도 가서 요와도야. 아까서라 노서도 내진일을 그렇게 따다지 요와도는 도가래.
So start with the simple things, like instead of just being obsessed by the appearance, always following the appearance, just start to think about how the way things really are. Instead of always going towards that appearance, just start that part of questioning.
We're
just chasing after these appearances all the time and kind of choosing our actions just based upon those experiences. If we can just step back from that, that's very useful. So you're saying that everything is explained from this ideal perspective, but Geshe said there's also a lot of things that aren't explained from the ideal perspective, right? Like we say, when an affliction arises, this is the antidote. So that's not an ideal perspective, right? Geshe feels that like not all of what he presents is immediately doable, right? But there is a lot that is doable. So just focus on what's doable. Yeah. So for example, when you're going through a really difficult time and you think, oh gosh, I'm suffering and nobody has more faults than me, and you're kind of stuck in that negative pattern, thinking about death and impermanence can be really healing, because you see, like, I've not yet met that great challenge of life. I'm still in like a relatively healthy, stable state. And that can give perspective to make the problem not seem so big. But then when we experience that serious illness, right? When we experience that terminal illness, we can't apply necessarily that positive way of thinking, but we can practice tonglen. We can practice taking and giving and experience it for others.
So
there's many things that you can do, and meditating on love, meditating on compassion, Geshe is sure that you can do some of that. So just keep trying, basically.
Thank you very much.
One last question here on
sure.
Zoom chat. So Marta Sanchez is asking, there's a story, a situation, and then a question. The other day, the ants invaded my kitchen and I disturbed them. I moved them with a feather so as not to kill them, but there were too many and I disoriented them from their root. But if I didn't, they never left because there was a lot of honey and food, and I got desperate, and that's why I moved them. What karma can I receive for that, and how to purify it?
Ko ngama di tapsang nangla bu trauma yore duwa rwa. Dene ko bu trauma den so sema song ine ko di chiugi pi dapo chik pesho tane konso par shibsa re duwa rwa. Dene bu trauma den so par shib ne konso tet sagi tsigi chagi yore rwa. Ane konso lam karpet shor drogi duwa. Ko sema song ine ko dela tene karinsa nangla drangsi dangsaya dramandra yore. Ko keishor ne par shib di le duksha chik saparebes ane le duksha sanayang digpa di khandes janguresa.
Me ta so dar go jabika loje pika karozo pika gewar pika ta te dembore tndigi ti ta ne ba chemona go so no shayo na
loso So our study and our practice, this is actually a good sign that you're thinking like this, because our study and our practice should make us aware when we have done something that might be the accumulation of unwholesome karma. And so now you've become aware of it. And so that means that, excuse me, just when you do your ordinary practices of confession and purification, that you just keep this in mind and you specifically purify.
하고서 어다 드리 템바치니 다 대도 땡땡아치나 다시도 또 대스네 여러 와서 걸어서가 못 사했고 다 이나에 걸어서 소속세 많아 대스니 봐 주시러 왔어.
Yeah, but Geshe said in terms of the negativity you've accumulated, okay, maybe you prevented them from getting the honey, which would have been a nice food from them, but also look at it from the perspective of you didn't kill them. Right? And because you didn't kill them, then the negativity here is actually quite slight. So there is a story about Nagarjuna and the ants, and we will tell that story in the future. And it actually relates a little bit to your situation. It's a bit of a heavy story, so I think Geshe is a little bit afraid of scaring folks, but we will share this in the future.
And I'm looking forward to the story too, because I have carpenter bees in my gompa, and so they're eating the boards. They're making chewing sounds continuously that's a bit disturbing to meditation, and I'm worried that eventually my gompa is going to fall over. But many years ago, I tried to remove them, and I ended up flushing out a larvae, and then, where's it going to go? I probably killed it. And so I'm just letting them do it, but,
ko lakang de pe kapala kadi ne shingsaya gi dra ko to gire dua and the young de la tene chichena lakang pet trola droge res tene kariso gores ko te shegi dua karinsa na kariso na yang chichena konso trong droge re dua ngomachi ko none konso gonga da bochik yusa so chichena se son sansa. Yeah. Yeah, these are difficult situations, Geshe said. Absolutely. Yeah.
The debt, I'm paying off a debt, and maybe I'll have to rebuild the gompa someday.
Chichena ko budin so bulun chikyores and de la tene lakang yangyar jago gire duas. Yeah. I mean, it's actually like Geshe, like he spent many years in India, so like we also have ants that come into the back of the center here into our kitchen. And one thing that Geshe does is like our little compost container where we keep the compost, we put this in a place where there's water. Right? So the water's there so the ants don't smell it, so they don't know what they're missing. But also if they do smell it, they can't approach. They'll stop before they get into the water. So yeah, there's things you can do.
Yeah, so if
Geshe said also, look at it from the point of view if an insect falls into our drink or something, and we're able to use our finger to lift it up and save its life, think how wonderful that I've been able to save a life today. May this purify the karma of insects that I've killed. That's another way to think about it. But also remember that, like in the process of cleaning, if you don't mean to kill them, but accidentally you might kill one or two, remember that a big factor in karma is intention. So if you didn't have the intention to harm or kill, that means that what you accumulate is a little bit lighter. So if this is bothering you, Marta, then whenever you're doing your confession and your purification practice, just remember this specifically and dedicate specifically to purifying that. So thanks very much. It looks like we've answered all the questions, so we will end here, and hopefully we'll see you next Sunday. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.